Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Today's topic is going to be what was the Constitutional Convention and what were some of the major compromises and things that took place at the Constitutional Convention. Simply put, the Constitutional Convention was the meeting of delegates from all 13 of the states, meeting in Philadelphia, right there in Pennsylvania, where they decided they were going to sit around and tear up the Articles of Confederation and start fresh. So it was just the meeting to write our plan of government, our formal plan of government. There are going to be two compromises that we want to focus on and that we really want to understand. A lot of times people say that politics is the art of what's possible, or the art of compromise, and that's exactly what took place at the Constitutional Convention. The first compromise that we want to look at is something that is known as the Great Compromise. All right, so we'll break it down. There were basically two plans that had to come together to create the Great Compromise. The first of these plans is what was known as the New Jersey Plan, or the Small State Plan. If you take a look at New Jersey right here, it's a relatively small state. It's not as small as Delaware or Connecticut or Rhode Island, but it's a small state. So New Jersey, small state plan. And it all goes back to the idea of representation, or how many votes your state gets when it comes to making laws. New Jersey, being a smaller state, thought that each state, whether you are New Jersey or whether you are Virginia, should get one vote. The small state plan, right? So New Jersey, very few people, one state, one vote. Population does not determine how many votes you get. So no matter if you have 5 people living in your state or 500,000 people living in your state, you all get the same amount of votes. For a little guy like New Jersey, this sounds great because you're just as equal as a big state like Virginia. Speaking of Virginia, however, if you're a big state like Virginia, this isn't such a great idea. This is not something that you're really down with, because you're like, hey, we have a lot more people. We should have a lot more votes. After all, why is it fair that a state with maybe 1,000 people has just as much power as a state with 10,000 or 100,000 people? So the Virginia plan, named after, of course, the state of Virginia, is considered the large state plan, where representation in Congress, or the votes that you get when it comes to making laws in Congress, are based on population. Now, we have another little diagram for the Virginia plan, or the large state plan. More people equals more votes. Right. Now these two groups of people, the New Jersey plan supporters and the Virginia plan supporters, both sides felt that their plan was a good plan. And they also felt that the other plan was unfair. So they thought about it. They thought, I have an idea. Why don't we just use both plans? And that is what we call is the Great Compromise. They decided that they were going to use both plans, and they were going to create two houses, or two groups of people who get to make laws. The fancy term that we use for this is a bicameral legislator. Bi meaning two, like bicycle. So a bicameral legislator. And this is a little bit of what the Great Compromise looks like. Right? On one hand, you have the New Jersey plan, the small state plan, where each state has the same amount of votes. Then on the other side, you have the Virginia plan, or the large state plan, where more people equals more votes. Today, the New Jersey plan is known as the U.S. Senate, right? The United States, we have 100 senators. Each state gets 100 senators. Whether you are Alaska, or Massachusetts, or Minnesota, or Virginia, California, New York, no matter what state you are, no matter how many people live there, each state has 2 senators. Do you know who our 2 senators are? Do you? Amy Klobuchar and Al Franken. They are our 2 senators elected from the state of Minnesota to go help us make laws. All right, so that's one half of the legislature. The other half is the House of Representatives. All right, and that's based on population. So a state like Alaska, even though, well, it's not on the map here, but even though it's big in terms of area, in terms of population, it's very small. So Alaska gets 1 representative into the House of Representatives. A state like California, they have the most with 54. Minnesota, we have 8. So we have 8 representatives from the state of Minnesota in the House of Representatives. If you total it up all together, there are 435. But we don't need to worry about that right now. So again, the Great Compromise. 2 houses. One house is the Senate, the large state plan, or I'm sorry, one house is the Senate, the small state plan. Each state gets the same amount of votes. The other house is the House of Representatives, also known as the large state plan, the Virginia plan. More people equal more votes. All right? And when both houses agree on a bill, like maybe they, like right now, a relevant example, healthcare, right? Healthcare reform. If the Senate agrees on a law and the House of Representatives agree on the same law, then the president can choose to sign that law. We'll get more into that in our next unit here. So that's the great compromise. New Jersey plan, small state plan, Virginia plan, large state plan. Take them together. Great compromise, 2 houses. The second compromise is, well, it's known as the Three-Fifths Compromise, and it's definitely a stain on our Constitution. It's a dark mark on our Constitution. It deals entirely with slavery. The delegates from the South wanted to keep slavery. The delegates from the North didn't want to keep slavery. However, they knew if they outlawed slavery in our Constitution, that the South would not sign it. So they had to figure out what to do. And basically, they just decided, well, we'll deal with it later. We'll not really worry about it. But what they wanted to, the problem that they had goes back to this large state plan here, right? Determining population. And every 10 years, we take a census and we count up how many people are in your state. And then that's how you determine how many representatives you get in the House of Representatives or under the large state plan. More representatives, or I'm sorry, more people equals more representatives equals more power. Well, in the South, the Southern delegates, they said we should count our slaves as part of our population. The people in the North said, excuse me? You are going to count people who you do not give rights to, people that you don't even consider as human, but you consider property? Now you want to count them as people and as a part of your population? I don't think so. Because you could easily buy a bunch of slaves and add slaves, increase your population, and give yourselves more power. And the South said, yeah, so what? We want to count them. And if we don't get to count them, we're not signing the Constitution. So basically, more slaves equals more representation in the minds of the South. So what they decided to do, and this is absolutely horrible, but what they decided to do is they decided to count 3/5 of a state's population, or of a state's slave population as its actual population, even though they weren't citizens and they didn't have rights. So if a state had 500 slaves, 300 of them would be counted towards the population, so just over half. All right, so those are our 2 major compromises. The Great Compromise, 2 houses, U.S. Senate, small state, House of Representatives, large state plan. New Jersey plan, Virginia plan coming together. Bicameral legislator, the Great Compromise. The second compromise is the Three-Fifths Compromise, again, dealing with counting slaves for representation. So those are the major compromises. The 2 groups of people, jumping back to the 2 groups of people arguing here, we have the Federalists, people like Alexander Hamilton who want strength with their government, right? People like Alexander Hamilton who said government should be strong, government should be powerful, government should be able to be in control. Then you have people called the Antifederalists, people like Thomas Jefferson, who feared strength, who were afraid that a government that is too strong would take away the rights of its citizen. And they took their pen that they were going to use to sign the Constitution, and they said, you know what? We're throwing it down. We will not sign it. We're throwing down our pen. We're not going to sign the Constitution unless you add a Bill of Rights. And thank goodness that the Anti-Federalists stood up for that. And because now we have the Bill of Rights, which is basically our shield, your shield, against the government. Things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, right to bear arms and own weapons, right to stand trial in front of a jury. All of these things, which we'll look at later, are found in the Bill of Rights, which is basically that shield against the government. So, we take these compromises, the Great Compromise, we take the Three-Fifths Compromise, we add them together, we get the Federalists who emphasized strength, the Anti-Federalists who feared strength, who fought for the Bill of Rights. We put all of that together and we end up with the United States Constitution. Fantastic document that we still have in place today in 2010. Next unit, we're going to dive further into that document and take a closer look at what it looks like. That's all I got for today. Good luck, study hard, stay smart.